Okay, good morning, everybody. So we're holding on Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph, Chav Vav Amud Aleph, the middle of the page, a little bit past the middle, and we're in the sugya of this particular last Gemara had to do with if you lease the property to someone. And they left, and you found a Metzia, whether or not you're chayiv to announce it because of the last person who was there. The Gemara then gave an analogy to Maser Sheni in Yerushalayim, the purpose of which to show that just as in Yerushalayim, they cleaned up all of the debris, if you will, or anything that was on the ground prior to the regel. So when it came to the regel, anything, especially money that was found in Yerushalayim was in Yerushalayim itself, not the Harabayas, which had a different Indian, but in Yerushalayim, especially near where the animals are sold, is likely Maser Sheni, because people who came to Eretz Yisrael had a lot of produce. They had to sell it. They couldn't eat it all. So they gave it their money that they transferred it into money. They gave it to aniyim. They gave it to friends, family, and people would buy korbanos, shlamim. So from that, the Gemara wanted to show that you see that the last monies that are found belong, you know what it is. So l'chayra, it should be the same here. The last monies that are found, you should be able to trace it back to the individual. So the Gemara, when we stopped, concluded we were talking about someone who owned an inn, and the inn had 3 rooms, and Bedafka 3, we'll see in a minute, we talked about. And of those 3 rooms, they were all leased to Yisraelim. And when you have 3 rooms to Yisraelim, the Gemara says that you don't have to announce because you don't know who it's from. It's only 3 rooms. The teretz is that each one can deny that it was that. In other words, each one can say, no, I didn't take it. Clearly, someone lost it. And someone can say, I didn't take it, and you can't make a shvua. Well, as the Gemara will explain in a minute, a shvua you can only make when there's a vadai of, let's say, 2 people. That's why it has to be 3. Because if it's 2 people, it's one of the 2, you can make a shvuas heshes. Yeah, you have to swear that it wasn't you. But when it's 3, now you already have a chashash where you can't say it's definitely somebody here, because it could have been any of the 3. You can't, on a suffix, you can't make a shvuas heshes. So that's how the Gemara wants to answer it and say that it's talking about 3 Yisraelim, and therefore you can't make a shvuas heshes. And then the Gemara now is going to go off on a tangent in a minute. We're going to discuss what the Gemara says. But before that, I said last week that I would look at the halacha and just have a chance to see what the halacha is here with regard to what we discussed last week. Because last week we were talking about all kinds of different scenarios. For instance, when you find something in an old wall or a new wall, and halfway in and halfway out. We had a very interesting discussion about, the thickness of a wall and whether a wall is it possible it belongs only to the owner or not. So the Gemara went back and forth. So unfortunately, the halachas of a Shabbos Saved are very sparse. There aren't many. So a lot of these scenarios, it's basically ask your local rabbi. In fact, the last halacha is, I'll just read the last halacha so you'll get a flavor. Matzah Metzia v'eni Yidoi mi'ibda v'ein b'sheyesh bo simen v'ein she'ein bo simen yesh be'inyonim elu harbe chelukei dinim. There's a lot of machlokes, no kidding. V'yasa she'elas chacham echiyasa, ask your local rabbi. So Isaf Kol Sof, this is not an area that there is a lot of what we call black letter law, in other words, definitive law, and you have to ask. But there are a couple of halachas here, and we're going to, and the Gemara, Mitzvah Shem, we're going to learn on Daf Chavav Amud Beis when we get it, tells us specifically what you're over, what lav you're over, what you're not over, that kind of thing.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah,
The fundamental thing that you mentioned is when you have three, you don't have to make a shvua. Why wouldn't they say each one makes a shvua one at a time? Because one of them obviously is the one that will say, I don't want to take a shvua. And
right.
so find out. So why are they limiting it if you have, once you pass two, whether it's 3, 4, or 5, the best thing can say make a shvua that it's not you.
So that's a very interesting question. The answer is because the Shavuos Hesses, if you remember in our discussion of Shavuos Hesses, it's a Shvua midrabanan so that someone will say, oh, if I have to make a Shvua, I'd rather either fess up or do whatever I have to do rather than making a Shvua. But that can only apply, Shavuos Hesses can only apply when you can confront an individual and say, it's you. There is nobody else. In other words, as between me and you, there's nobody else. So therefore, it's got to be you. And so the guy says, but it's not me. Whatever. There's a third, whatever. You don't know him, whatever. Okay, you make a shvua, which will sort of put the fear of God in you. If it really isn't you, okay, no one likes to make a shvua, but at least you know that you're not going to make a shvua shav. You're not going to make a full swear. Where you have multiple people, you can't confront the person and say, it's you. It's got to be you. There's 2 other people who it could be. So Chazal say, in that situation, you can't make someone make a shvuas hesses. In other words, the person who's lost it, he's the one who wants to press the shvua. You can't press the shvua because you can't say with any degree of certainty who it is.
So you're saying that you're worried about a false shvua.
A false accusation, which would lead to an unnecessary shvua, yes. So if the accusation has, what we call raglayim, it has real legs to it because he's got to be the one, and he says no and makes a shvua, then we really have to believe him because no one takes shvuas lightly. But when you have multiple people, and sort of we'll get to it in a minute. It's the top Rashi on the base. That shvua doesn't have the same. You can't confront the person, so you can't go around making people make shvuas. That clearly can't happen. The Gemara previously had said it. It's not appropriate. So in order to have someone make a shvua, there's got to be a very, at least in your mind, high degree of certainty. Can you have a high degree of certainty that it's Ruvain when there's Shimon and Levi there? Of course not. So under those circumstances, we don't make you make a shvuas hesses. That's the halach of shvuas hesses.
Okay, thank you.
On the halachas of Shavuos Aveda, just let me read you a couple of the halachas, which kind of will sum up what we've been saying. Okay, and we said that what kind of mitzvah it is. It's an important mitzvah. So Simon Kuf Pei Zayin Haroa Avedis Yisrael Chayv Utapabol Ashiva Labalea. If someone, the whole premise of why are we discussing this Gemara? Because when you find an Aveda, you have to Chayav Utapabol. You have to be involved in returning it. Shenema Hoshev Teshivim. We quoted that pasuk. It's in Devarim. So if you have to be involved in the mitzvah Hoshev Teshivim, this whole discussion we've had in the last couple of weeks where we're grappling, does he make an announcement? Does he not make an announcement? It's not just simply, oh, I'll make an announcement, I'll put it in the newspaper, or I'll clap on the stender in the shul. There's an actual mitzvah involved here. And we know this from way back, that any money of another Jew that you can save, in other words, to save someone money is a very important, he shouldn't lose money. We said that a long time ago when we were learning even Perek Aleph, that, there's sort of a chiyuv, it's not in so many words, that, okay, Baltashkis, but you shouldn't cause someone else to lose to lose money or to lose value. It's not codified in a mitzvah, but it's an important concept. So he says, just to save, so it's in the general rubric of a Shavas Aveda, even though it's not a Shavas Aveda per se, that you shouldn't cause someone else, not of your own doing, of his own doing, that he shouldn't lose money. If you can save someone a penny, a dollar, a pruta, we'll see, is important. A pruta, then you should try to do it. Now, here's the one siyuf that I want to, because this will be a jump start to what we're about to say. Remember, we have the whole Shimon ben Eliezer gave us this whole discussion on Chav Daled, whether or not you have to return it if it's Rov Yisrael, Rov Goyim. So we had a very detailed discussion about that, and ultimately we didn't quite reach a conclusion. So here says Simon. You hear? Even if a Yisrael comes and gives you a simon, where you have Rov Goyim in a community which is a Rov Goyim, Ein a chayav lahachzir, says the halacha, mishum de mistama kavanis yayish hemeno. Why? What's the whole concept of returning? The concept is that when a person is miyayish, when a person says, "No, I'm not finding this," that's the important line in the sand after which you can say there is new bilas, there's new ownership. Again, sometimes we have to impute yish. Of course, we know that from the Gemara. If a person is not miyayish, then you can stand on your head and do what you want. He is the owner of that property. If you convert it improperly in some fashion, you're Lord Sigzol, you go into all kinds of other issues. So it's up to the owner. Now, a lot of our Gemara discusses imputed yish. Can you impute yish or not? Can you say the circumstance is such that he has to be miyayish? Because nobody in his right mind would think he would get it back. So that's subjective, but the Gemara does say subjectively we can impose yish. Otherwise, the Ein L'Davar Sof. I mean, if somebody finds something, how does he know he's not going to be chayiv? He's going to be over on Geneva because the guy wasn't miyayish. So we have to have some seder in our mind of when you're miyayish. So again, it all depends on yish. So we say that when there's Rov Goyim, even with the simon, says the halacha, he can keep it. Why? Because he's miyayish. Oh, that's the halacha. However, mikol makom, tov v'yashar, it's good and proper. Lasas lifnim mishuras hadin, and we've talked about lifnim mishuras hadin, that a person should go beyond just the four corners of the halacha, right? Lahachzil Yisrael shenosam b'simin. So in other words, the halacha is telling us, alpi halacha in a place like Washington D.C., New York City, Rov Goyim, we impute yiyush. We say that if a person lost something, he clearly is miyayish because he's not going to find it among tens of thousands of goyim. They're not likely to return it. However, it's the proper thing to go lefnim mishuras hadin and to return it. When he has a simon. So in other words, it's not a waste of time to make an announcement, because if you make an announcement and someone says, "Oh yes," and gives you the proper simon, then even though we say that 99 out of 100 or 999 out of 1,000 people would be miyayish, it's lefnim mishuras hadin, you should do it. But kofen al zeh, says the halacha, and we're makbid. The kofen al zeh, v'hamotzi hu ani u'balaveda hu ashir. If the balaveda is an ashir, listen to this. We haven't discussed this. If the finder is an ani, a poor person, and the person who lost it is an usher, ein it tzorach lasas lefnim mishuras hadin. We have a double standard. We have two standards here. that for an ani, if for a regular person, we go lifnim mishur sadin. For an ani, he doesn't have to go lifnim mishur sadin. The makom sheyesh din l'malchusa lahaksa aveda. And in the case with his din l'malchusa, chayv chonin lahaksa, he has to return. Okay.
That's interesting point though about if the person who finds it is an ani. So on the one hand, we can say, you know what, he shouldn't have to go lifting mishur zadin. Maybe this is what Hashem's way of saying, you know, you get something a little extra to help you through. You never know the cheshbon. On the other hand, whether it's something fancy, even if let's say he finds a gold watch, who's to say this isn't some other ani's gold watch, that this is his one prized possession, and you don't know what, and the flip side, I mean, you could find something that seems relatively ordinary, and it turns out it's from an ashir. So it's like, just because the person who finds it an ani, that doesn't necessarily tell him whether what he found was indeed from another ani or from somebody who has something.
That's a very good point. Because the lashon of the halach is v'ma'amotze hu ani u'bal ha'aveda hu ashir. So how do you know that the bal aveda? If you know who's the bal aveda, you have to return it to him, right? I mean, if you know who the bal aveda is, of course you have to return it.
If it has this, if the simon is the guy's name and address, it's a done deal. You'd have to anyway return it,
Right. So it's a little bit hard to understand what he means that. And if the ani is the finder and the loser is an usher, and it's our class, I guess you go by the object. If you see an object, if it's a 18-karat diamond encrusted watch, it doesn't belong to another ani. Okay, I mean, at least we can maybe make that assumption.
By and large, yeah.
What?
Generally, again, it could be the one prized possession.
Right. So you're right. I mean, without saying specifically. That's what we have to assume. We have to assume that if someone finds such a grandiose aveda that it clearly belongs to an ashir, and then under this circumstance, you don't have to go. You have to Shabbos aveda. Shabbos aveda is a Shabbos aveda. I told you the story of at my son's wedding. There was someone, a woman, obviously, was dancing, whatever. And lost a very beautiful, heavily diamond earring, one earring. So, and it was at the wedding. So clearly someone at the wedding lost it. It wasn't, a stranger, and someone found it and it was returned. So there was sort of, the question, well, there wasn't a question. Of course you had to return it, but someone made the remark that diamond earring would never have been missed. In other words, the person who lost it, may have had a replacement in her, So, but that doesn't matter. Lifnim mishur sadin, not lifnim mishur sadin, is a mitzvah of a Shabbos aveda.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Asher, what's the definition? What's the and what are the limits? I mean, is somebody an usher if they're not poor, or is there a certain monetary limit that would make them?
It isn't so. Yeah, you know what? It isn't so much a dollar amount. He's worth X dollars, or in today's that much time than that. But you knew who was an usher. Okay.
So usher, what's the definition? Usher?
Usher means a wealthy person. Ani is a poor person. Usher is a wealthy person. So it's clearly subjective. There isn't a line that says if you have $1 million you're wealthy. If you have 500,000 you're not. Maybe today under our president and under the tax rules, it might be easier to understand who's an usher or not. If you're in the half of 1% of billionaires, then you're an usher. Everybody else is not.
Okay, so my question is, okay, so a poor person, we know what a poor person is, right? They're going to be the person who goes into the grocery store and is going to say, can I afford to buy this? Can I afford to buy this for dinner tonight? If you're a person like me, I don't think about going into the grocery store. I don't think about how much money I've got. I just buy what I want, but I don't consider myself to be a wealthy person.
Right.
So if I lost an article, would I be where would I fit in that? I'm not a poor person.
So I think the halacha here is not talking about a Beinoni. It's not talking about the middle class, most of us, we're well off, we're somewhat, yes, no. I mean, I think at least here, he's referring to maybe sort of the polar opposites. If he's referring to someone who has enough for one meal, and he goes, from meal to meal, and then you have someone who owns, again, when Menashe was speaking, I was thinking of Leket Shikrampeya. If someone has fields and can afford for an ani to come onto his property and collect Leket Shikrampeya, and again, I'm not saying he has to be super wealthy for that, but if someone is in that category, then you could say, oh, he's an Ashir. But again, Ashiris has its levels. I mean, we know there are millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, multi-billionaires. So where do you draw the line? What's an Ashir? So it's a little bit of a moving target, Scott, but I think you'll know him when you see him. Yeah. You say, oh, this fella is an Ashir. Okay, this is an Ashir. So it's not more, it's really the two polar extremes, the up and the downs. All right, so one more halacha I want to state because that we've talked about it, and then we'll go right into the Gemara. Kol Motzia Veda, and this is the last Mishnah we talked about. Kol Motzia Veda, ben sheyesh bo simen, ben she'ein bo simen. In motzo derek hanacha, if he found it in a place where it was placed, remember our Mishnah, we replaced something, someone put a garment or a hammer or an axe next to a fence or behind a fence, right? That was our Mishnah. Even if you are uncertain, if it was dropped there or placed there, it's hard to imagine that someone dropped a talus neatly behind a fence. Okay, that's not likely. But the halacha here says, if you are in doubt, if it was placed there or lost there, asa liga b'hem. That's what our Mishnah told us. Don't touch it, because if a person put it there, he probably put it there for a reason. He may not have a siman. You take it away, he can't get it back because you're going to say, all right, you bring me a siman, I'll give you the talus. I don't have a siman, but I put it there. So again, this Mishnah codifies what we just said, this halacha codifies what we just said in our Mishnah, in that previous Mishnah, that if you place something, you shouldn't do it. And if you do it, then you're stuck with it until Eliyahu Navi comes, because you can't just give it away because there's no siman. So no one's going to be able to claim it. So essentially you've really taken someone's possession. There's you're not going to hold them chai for Geneva or anything, but you're basically saying you have now hurt someone because he has no siman to tell you. And now there's a machlokes about Rava and Rabba. So maybe according to Rava, it might work because he'll tell you, oh, I found it behind the fence. Because remember, makom is a siman. According to Rabba, makom is not a siman. You could tell me all day long, I put it behind the fence, this, that, and the other. Not a siman. So you really run into problems if you disturb something that, and again, the Gemara says, sofek inicham, you shouldn't touch it. You really shouldn't touch it. And this halacha codifies that point. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara.
One minor thing on that.
Yeah.
Which is, and we may have talked about this before, but you could easily have a situation, let's say it's a piece of clothing or some food. If it's sitting out on an ordinary day, it could sit for days and be just fine. But if you just heard the weather report, there's thunderstorms coming through, that this thing's going to get ruined if it's left there. And so you're sort of torn. Another 12 hours, it'll be okay. But after that, it's going to get ruined if it's left there. But if I take it away now, maybe the guy's going to come back in an hour,
Right. So I think by food, notice that we haven't discussed that because food is different. I mean, something that well, it doesn't even have to be food. If you find something and you see where it is,
you find a piece, even just a piece of ordinary clothing, except a raincoat.
Right,
it sits out in the rain. It's gonna
right. And there's a hurricane coming, or something that could potentially destroy it. What's your responsibility to try to save it? versus leaving it for the person to come back. So again, the halacha doesn't directly speak about that, but just in thinking about it, since Hoshef Teshivein doesn't mean just that you have to return it to him, but you have to remember what the halacha said. The halacha said that we are sensitive to people's money, and that and you should not, in other words,
Doesn't the person become a shomer chinam?
well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So in other words, in the category of Hoshef Teshivein is the words of the words of the halacha is the chol mammon shel chaver she'adam yachal lahatzil. Anything that you can save, shelo yovel, that he shouldn't lose it. So you're both. It's a good point. So in other words, if he's going to lose it because it's going to be destroyed in the weather or any kind of circumstance, then you have, according to the halacha, you have a chiyuv, and it's in the category of hashavas aveda. So here we have the dilemma of someone who put something away to hide it. There is no siman. If he removes it, then under that circumstance, it's a balancing test. I would say, in all likelihood, you probably, you see, here you're into another problem, because let's say you take it and after the hurricane or after the storm, you put it back, but the guy who owns it really came right before the storm to take it, and it wasn't there because you took it. You took it to save it, and we're going to put it back, and he took it, and he's coming to take it. So you have a very delicate situation of what to do. Leave it, and you may be violating the spirit of Hoshef Teshivein. You may be violating the spirit. And otherwise, it's a good question. And the halacha doesn't speak to it. I'll say what I said last week. Let me look into it, because maybe there are other mafarshim. At least we found out that the halacha tells us that you have a chiyuv to save a person's property, even if it isn't directly returning it to him. Now, your question is, do you save it or do you not save it in a situation where he may not find it again? So now you're really in a dilemma, because you want to save it, but if you save it and he comes back, he may never find it. That's yet, I mean, now we're really talking about a higher degree of Hoshef Teshivein. So the answer is the halacha doesn't speak to it. It's not clear what to do. Maybe there's a tshuva. We'll look to see if maybe there's a tshuva on this that either Moshe or someone addressed, because clearly it's a fascinating question. What do you do in a circumstance where Hoshef Teshivein applies in just in principle, but you run the risk by trying to save it of the guy losing it.
Let's remember that the Torah tells you to take it to your house, which presumably is a place where it's protected from the elements and from.
No. Definitely take it to your house. But David, the problem is, by taking it to your house, you will have removed it from where the Mishnah tells us, from the Gader. The guy comes back while it's in your house and it's not there, and he's miyayish. He says, "Oh, someone took it." Now, someone took it to preserve it, but what does that taking mean? Because now the Gemara tells us, don't put it back. It's yours. I mean, you got to either figure out how to give it to somebody or hold it till Eliyahu Navi comes. So the dilemma is now yours.
But you do have the alternative then of announcing it with Mokom as the siman.
Only according to Rava.
Yeah.
According to Rava, it doesn't work.
So do they link the finding of something with what class of shomer you are? Like I said, shomer.
No. David just raised David, you asked, right? It was the question of, well, l'chayri, he's a shomer chinam because he found it and he has certain responsibilities as shomer chinam. No one told him. I mean, shomer chinam doesn't mean I give it to you as a friend, hold it to me, and I don't pay you. A shomer chinam could be someone who finds an object and and has a responsibility to preserve it. No one told him, but he found it. So that could be a shom chinam as well. So, but remember, a shom chinam has absolutely other than the deliberate,
Damage or something.
what's that?
Deliberate damage or something.
Deliberate damage, right? In other words, he has what achrayus does he have? All he has to do is hold it. He's not mechuyev on anything. I mean, yes, you can say he took it upon himself, but again, the issue here is not that it will be damaged or anything. The issue is that by taking it, he's taking it in such a way that that the real owner will never find it, because clearly it was meant to be put in a place. Again, we're not talking about walking along the street and on University Boulevard or somewhere, picking up an object in what is either Rosh Hashanah or a Carmelist, whatever you want to call it, and then holding it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who finds something that was squirreled away in a way that it's clear that it wasn't dropped. It was put there intentionally. But here you're going to have a major storm. It clearly will be torn to shreds and maybe blown away entirely. So what's the downside? Let me take it and at least preserve it so that it's not lost forever. But now what do I do with it? That's the dilemma. That's the real dilemma. So let me, again, maybe there's a tshuva on this, because this is a very interesting situation, which kind of falls between the cracks of what the Mishnah is telling us and what the Halacha is telling us. So we've opened up a different can of worms, and we have to see if we can close it. All right, back to the Gemara, 2/3 down. We said that Bar Kapara says, "She'asa pundik l'shlosha," and that's the circumstance. Now, let's remind ourselves that what we said a couple of blocks back, it was Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar asked the question: if you find something, do you have to make an announcement? And then the Gemara went through great detail to give us a bunch of scenarios. Did he find it where there was Rov Yisrael? Was it Rov Goyim? And then on and on and on. The Gemara asked, I think, 6 questions as to even if it was Rov Yisrael, did he announce it? Did the Rabbanan argue on it? So in other words, the Gemara kind of did not resolve the question as to whether or not he can keep it or not in case there was Rov Yisrael. Says the Gemara here, as a result of the answer that Bar Kapara just gave, Pundik l'shlosha Yisrael, Shema Mina. You see it? It's about maybe 10 lines on the bottom. The last 2 words, Shema Mina. So from here we learn halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Wait a minute, what's he saying? Why is the halacha like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? We could not conclude whether it was like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar or not. So he wants to say afilu barov Yisrael, that the halacha is in a pundik. There were 3 Yisraelim who were in the motel. That's Rov Yisrael in this circumstance? Of course it is. It's only Yisrael. So in the case of only Yisrael or Rov Yisrael, we just said a halacha that you don't have to announce. You don't have to return it. Isn't that a clear support to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar was clearing what happens in Rov Yisrael. Do you return it or not? You make an announcement. Here we have an answer. You have Rov Yisrael. The circumstances that there was only Jews there, and your hands are tied. So we see a clear answer that by Rov Yisrael you do not have to announce. So we cleared back and forth on Chav Daled and Aleph. And here the Gemara is saying, we see from Bar Kapara, we have an answer to that question. So the Gemara says, no, you're barking up the wrong tree. You can't make that analogy. Elo Amar Rav Menashe bar Yaakov, no. We're going to be talking about Ovdei Kachavim, not about Yisrael. So with Yisrael, we don't know what we do. But with Ovdei Kochavim, and Rashi says, so first Rashi says the second wide line, L'shlosha Yisrael, Bavas Achas. V'chol shkenim hoya Ovdei Kochavim, Misha Nafim Limenu, V'yayish L'yodem Amayim Ovid. So he says, Pundik, okay, V'afilu Barov Yisrael. The Ovid the Miyayish V'lo Somech, the Lahade Nele, the Lo Pligi B'Dover Sheyesh Bo Simen L'Ein Bo Simen. Shlosha Ovdei Kochavim, I did the Nachit Shlosha Gabi Yisrael, Nachit Gabi Ovdei Kochavim, B'Vadin Chad, B'Vachi Achron. So he wants to give an answer that we're talking about 3 non-Jews, even 1 non-Jew. But we say 3 because the answer before was 3 Yisraelim, so we want to say 3 Ovdei Kochavim. But even with 1 non-Jew, it's sufficient. B'Vachi Achron, he should be the last one. Okay, so what's the answer? The answer is no. It's no riot of Shimon ben Elazar because we're not talking about Rov Yisrael. The issue that was addressed, the big question of Shimon ben Elazar is if you have Rov Yisrael, is there Yiyush? Is there Yiyush? So before we said we gave a raya that Bar Kappara said, yes, there's Yiyush because there's 3 people, he doesn't know where to collect it from. So comes Rav Menashe ben Yaakov and he says, no, I don't accept that because we're talking about 3 Ovdei Kochavim or even 1 Ovdei Kochavim, who was the last one, and so therefore it's no riot to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Okay, so he wants to slug up the riot. That was the point of it. He wanted to slug up the riot. Says the Gemara of Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua Afilu Temer L'Shloshi Yisrael. No. You can even say we're talking Shloshi Yisrael, and if we're talking Shloshi Yisrael, then the question is this a raya to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? No, and the Gemara says, "My tama, who denafel minei miyayish." No, it's no raya because here we're going to say that there was yish. So the whole question about losing something, let's say in Yerushalayim, it's Rov Yisrael. If he drops it, is he going to be miyayish or not? So what's the question? The question is, in a city full of Jews, where everybody knows there's a mitzvah, Shavos Aveda, and everybody knows what to do, is a person going to be miyayish because he's going to say, I'm never going to see it again? That's the question. That's the clear of what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says. So you want to show from Pundik that when there are 3 Yidden in an inn, he's miyayish, right? He's miyayish. So therefore, it should be a right from Shimon ben Elazar. So now you have to listen to this svara of the Gemara. And this is, so the Gemara is going to give us a different interpretation of when Yish applies. So listen to
Rabbi,
this.
This is a case of no simon, right?
It's a case of we're saying even with a simon, where you have Rov Yisrael, even with a simon, the question is, will it ever come back to him? In other words, will it come back to him? So listen to this. No, afilu teimel shloshi Yisrael. You can say shloshi Yisrael. If the shloshi Yisrael and you don't announce it, it's a riot from Shimon ben Elazar. Says the Gemara, no. Why? My tama. What's the reason? Who denafel minei miyayish. Why? Because in the case of Pundik with 3 Jews, he is miyayish. Why is he miyayish? Meima Omar, he says, Mechdi, inishachvina lo hava bahadi. There was no other person except for these 3. Elahana Omar kamei kamazmane lahadrali. I have said in the presence of these 3 people a number of times, I lost this. Someone should return it. Lahadrali, and no one returned it. And there was no stranger who walked into the inn. If someone had in mind to return it, they would have returned it already because I've said I lost it. So because it isn't returned to me, they have in mind to steal it. So what's he saying? He's saying that, you know what? There's three people here. They're all fine Erlich Hayidin. Nobody else walked into the inn and I lost it. And and they came to the table for breakfast and say, you know what? I lost this item. We repeated it numerous times and nobody stepped up to give him the item. So in his mind, he can't make it. Remember, we said there's no Shuas Hesses, can't make him swear. So what's he going to do? He's miyayish. No one is stepping forward. He can't accuse anybody because you have three people. That's not allowed. And you can't accuse one because of the other two and vice versa. So he has to be miyayish. So now,
Excuse me, Rabbi, wouldn't he say to the others, look, maybe you folks can help me find it. I lost something. This is what it was. Why would you go to the case where he's miyayish automatically?
no. What we're saying here is if it's in a confined area and there are three Yidden who were in this inn and he had it the night before, now he doesn't have it. So at breakfast, he repeats, I don't have this. It's got to be here somewhere. And nobody steps up to say, and nobody walked in from the outside and nobody steps up. So he's got to say to himself, I can't make anybody swear. Nobody is coming to me. Someone is stealing it and I have my hands are tied. Go ahead.
Why does he go to that somebody stole right away? It doesn't make any sense.
Because they searched high and low and couldn't find it.
But it's hiding under the couch cushion with the remote and the loose change.
It's
lost, still lost.
It's going to be like Lavan and the Trophim, and Rachel is sitting on the Trophim. I mean, at the end of the day, you've searched high and low. The inn is only so large. A rat took it and ran off with it into a hole? I mean, clearly somebody is hiding it. You can't accuse anybody and you can't go through anybody's possession. But maybe we've been in this situation before, even as kids, where you know something with certainty, but you can't prove it. So someone took it. And if that someone took it and doesn't own up, how are you going to get it? I mean, let's talk about how are you going to get it if you have a limited number of people and everybody says, I don't know what you're talking about.
But that's all the more reason not to be miyayish. You're miyayish if you lost it on the street and everybody around, but somebody else passed by, somebody you didn't see, who knows? Okay, I'm miyayish. But if I'm in one building, small building, there's only three other people it could possibly be. They're not owning up to it now. Either it's hidden somewhere and literally nobody's found it, or somebody took it. But you know what? After I go ahead and announce publicly I lost object X, I go away for an hour. You know what? I might come back and magically found that it's sitting there in the corner because Ruvain went ahead and thought better of himself for taking it now that he knows even though it's not him personally, he's been found out and he leaves it there. Nobody will know it was he who was the one who had it. I'm not miyayish because I know it might still turn up.
So Menashe, you have great faith in humankind, but let me tell you what this Gemara is telling us. Look at Rashi, and then you're going to hold your head, because what you just said, the Gemara turns completely on its ear and says there's a greater likelihood he will get it back in Yerushalayim with a couple 100,000 people than with the three people in the inn. That's exactly what the Gemara is saying. There's a greater likelihood a person is not miyayish if he drops it on the street of Yerushalayim where the Rov Yisraelim and he makes an announcement and someone will return it, than in the pundik with three people. That's exactly what. So take a look at this Rashi. It's fascinating. That's what I'm telling you. This is a fascinating situation. Yisrael. You can really say that it is about 6 lines up. In other words, you can really say that we're talking about 3 Yisraelim in the pundik, and there's still no raya to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Why? You can't prove the halachas like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. When is there a machlokes hechad denafla b'makim sheharabim mitzuyin? Because Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar's case is about a rabbin. Shimon ben Elazar wasn't talking about a pundik. He's talking about a rabbin where Rov Yisrael The lo yadalu lekula the sava ha'ored umeima omahu the eshkach lo yada mimi naflo. Ukushiagia haregel. When the regel comes, Yachriz Oleh, he'll announce it. Ve'etin simen, and someone will give a simen. Ve'etel aval hacha, the other lahu lekula. Everybody knows who it belongs to. In the case of the rabbim in Yerushalayim, nobody knows. So in the regel, he'll make an announcement, and someone will say, "Oh, I found this object." And in the regel, right in front of the Beis Hamikdash, there'll be a stand, and someone will say, "Oh, I found this object. I have to return it." But ahacha the yada lahu lekula, everybody in the room knows, right? So it's human nature now, Menashe. It's human nature. Everybody knows. Below Ode, and nobody admits it. Yishu miyayish. He's miyayish. May mama, he says, no one's going to give it to me. So in a confined space of 3, where everybody knows he lost, and no one's willing to fess up, it's worse than in a open air where you have who knows how many people. And he said, you know what? In the regel, everybody comes to the Beis Hamikdash, and I'm going to stand there in front of the Makam of Abayis, and I'm going to announce this beautiful diamond, or whatever it is, and someone will come and say, yes, I found it, or whatever. So you're taking what you think is the long odds and saying the long odds are better than the short odds. Because the short odds, you've already determined that someone is stealing it, because everybody in the room knows and no one is willing to fess up. That's a fascinating, I guess, maybe psychological profile of what the Gemara is telling us is the case of a Shavas Aveda. Here, someone clearly knows and doesn't want to say, and you have better odds in public with everybody else announcing it. And
So Rabbi, Rabbi, Yael, so we assume the best in people, but we're also realistic. In other words, the hope is you lose it, and you're with thousands of people. Somebody who's a mensch will find it, they'll announce it, and that's great. But we're also realistic. If you have 2 people and you've announced that you lost something, and they're there and they hear it and they don't say a word, so you're just being realistic. Yeah.
In real time, the ambient situation has proven to you that these people are not going to give you what you're looking for. But in abstract, we still think there are enough honest people out there.
Right. So, and Reb Shimon ben Elazar's scenario is in the large.
Fascinating.
And so the Gemara, the point of this Gemara is you can't bring a raya from a pundik of 3 Yisraelim,
to the
one way or the other, to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, because Reb Shimon ben Elazar is talking about a multitude where we say, yeah, maybe someone will find it and someone will come back. But in a situation which is different than that, you can't bring a raya to Reb Shimon ben Elazar one way or the other. That's the upshot of the Gemara. But what's fascinating is what we're talking about is that in one sense, we're talking about, a needle in a haystack, and there we have more faith that it'll come back than in a case where you have clearly several people, but somebody is lying. Somebody is not going to return it. You can't argue with that.
In the case of the regel, is there another factor that somebody who finds it, he's worried that somebody has seen him pick it up?
Say it again.
In the case of a crowded situation, wouldn't the one who picks it up be somewhat concerned that somebody watched him pick it up? So he's not alone. There's people all around him, and therefore he says, I can't get away with this. I'm going to.
That's possible. But when you have thousands or tens of thousands of people milling around, and you bend down to pick it up, how is someone going to know whether you're picking up a Metzia or you're picking up something that you dropped? I mean, it's really sort of. Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to fathom. But again, what's fascinating, and Rashi points out, is that a person has greater faith that he'll get it back when you're dealing with such a multitude than when you're dealing in a confined space and you've already announced it and no one is going to give it to you. You're miyayish. You're clearly miyayish because you have no choice. you can't accuse and you can't make anybody swear. I'm stuck. What do I do? Yeah, Menashe.
Yeah, so interesting point. We're looking through this Rashi. If I understand this correctly, this is not actually what I was first thinking, which is literally Regel and Yerushalayim, where you could argue. I was going to suggest maybe that people are there to do mitzvahs, and so of course they're going to be more careful about Hashavas Aveda. This is actually, I think, the more traditional meaning of Hashavas Aveda, which is that, if I remember correctly, that basically you find it, you have to wait till the next regel, and maybe it's in certain cases there's a whole cycle of regalim and announce in a public place at each regel, and so it could be that you found it on Hanukkah, and now it's a few months later on Pesach that you're going ahead and making the public announcement because now everybody is there. That's the time to make an announcement. Not necessarily Yerushalayim and not that it was lost on the regel. And so that's even more of an indictment of the issue of robbing just more the general public and so on, as long as it's Rov Yehudi, as opposed to the very specific situation of, you got three people, one of them must have took it.
Right. So Rashi's giving us a more extreme view, but let's forget about the regel situation. Let's just say he loses it in a public place.
And that's my point, is that I think he's talking about the generic losing a public place.
Right.
Regel is just man lahachris.
Right. Let's say Kent Mill is Rov Yisrael, and you lose it in Kent Mill. So you say, you know what? There's Rov Yisraelim, and probably someone is going to find it and maybe turn it into the lost and found, and then there'll be an announcement and I'll be able to find it. But again, the parallel, the comparison is a confined space of three people and an open space of hundreds of people, both Rov Yisraelim, and he has greater faith in the Rov Yisraelim of the hundreds or thousands of people that he does in the three people.
It's not a question of faith, though. Once he asked and they said no, that's the end of it.
That's the end of it.
Unfortunately, those people have proven themselves to you, or there's something going on that none of us fully understand. But either way, the Yiyush is understandable.
That's correct. The Yiyush is there, and it's clear at that point. What is he going to do? He has to be miyayish, but he can have a glimmer of hope when he didn't get a definitive no from everybody. So there is the possibility of yes, and he's willing to hang his hat on that glimmer of hope that there will be someone who will return it. So again, the subject, the two circumstances are fascinating in contrast, but the bottom line is it's no riot to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, because Rav Shimon ben Elazar is talking about a case where there's a multitude, and therefore there's the possibility. This example of Pundik B'Shlosha is talking about a very limited circumstance, and he has to be miyayish, but you can't glean from this, you can't draw from this that's the case everywhere else. So that's really what the Gemara is trying to tell us. But this contrast is fascinating, again, as to how someone might look at it and be miyayish. And again, the key is yish. So if you're standing there and everybody's looking in the face like, what are you talking about? Where do you go? You have nowhere to go. At least in a multitude, you have a havamina as someone, not everybody told you no. So maybe this is a lesson in life. I mean, sometimes you get disappointed and because you're in with a certain set of circumstances, there's no wiggle room. What am I going to do? I have to be miyayish. In any event,
an observation, and I'm saying this, no pun intended, but it's good to see at least that years ago within the society of our people, they're no different than they are right now. Because it seems like there's no honesty. There's still crookedness, corruption, theft now, then, as we have now. So we're going through all these Gemara talking about the negativism of the Jewish people. And here, if you're in a situation where there's two others and yourself, and somebody has it, and they don't stand up to the fact that they took it. That's the sad part of it.
So David, this doesn't mean it happened.
Well, if it didn't happen, why are they bringing up a situation that may happen once in a blue moon?
Because the Gemara wants to show, see, again, even in an abstract, the Gemara wants to show a contrast. You can have a situation that seems like it should be easy to resolve, but halachically you can't resolve it because you can't make someone swear. And if someone denies it, yes, you're right. That's the worst instinct in somebody. What you're saying is, in the abstract, we're no better off. We're no different than our ancestors a couple thousand years ago, because back then they also could have been a Goslin or a Ganef and not own up. We're talking an abstract, David. We're not talking in an exact. We're talking. So if that were the case, then with three people, you have to be miyayish because you have no choice. So the Gemara is trying to just break it down and show us that here's the circumstance, and you would think, oh, this is simple. I'm going to go ahead. Why should I be miyayish? There's three people. Someone's going to give it to me. Says the Gemara, you tried. Nobody fessed up. Someone clearly took it. You don't know who, and your hands are tied. So this is it's an abstract, but this is the circumstance. Yes, today could be the exact same thing, and we're no better or worse than our ancestors. So I think you don't look at it as an absolute. You look at it as a concept and as an abstract. And the Gemara is telling us that maybe you have a better shot at getting it back when you have a multitude where it could have been any one of a number of people. And I don't give up hope, although how much hope is there? Whereas where you would think in a confined area, just a few people, of course I shouldn't give up, says the Gemara, but you have no choice but to be miyayish because your hands are tied. That's what I think the Gemara is really telling us, not that they were bad people or they were good people. Yeah, sure, they could have been bad people, and everybody said, I'm not turning this thing in, I'm keeping it. And that right, human nature is what it was then and it is now. That's human nature, David. No one's going to change that. But as a practical matter, it stands on its ear that you have greater faith in getting it back when you have a few thousand people who are involved than when there's three people involved. So ultimately, the Gemara is telling us. So according to the one who said, in other words, Rabbi Menashe ben Yaakov said, you know what, we're talking about Oidei Kachavim. So there's no comparison to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And Rabbi Nachman says, no, you could even compare it to Yisraelim, apples to apples, Rov Yisraelim, and you still can't resolve it because that's a situation that's totally different than Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar's situation. That's how the Gemara comes out. So that's where we are right now. Now, actually, I was going to try to get a little bit further, but I think so. The Gemara, now that the Gemara gave us this insight that hold on a second. Right. So now Rav Nachman gave us this insight. The Gemara now goes on to tell us other insights from Rav Nachman that prove this point. And I think we're going to have to hold that to next week because it's going to go into a whole different thing. So Rav Nachman doesn't just pluck this out of thin air. He has a raya as to why he says what he says in this particular situation. So we'll hold on to that. But anyway, what's fascinating in this whole Gemara and in the halacha is that it's not what you think it is. There's a lot of twists and turns here. But I will look at the letter to see on this question. Let me just remind myself. So to see whether or not there's a tshuva on the question that you raised, Menashe, about what to do in a circumstance where you have an Aveda that, let's say, someone put in a hidden place, like our Mishnah says, and it couldn't be destroyed. And the halacha tells us that you have a mitzvah Shavas Aveda even to protect someone's money, his possessions. What do you do balancing that against the fact that if you take it, he may never get it because he'll try to find it, he won't, he has no siman, and what's he going to do? So that's the question, right? That's the question. We have to see whether or not there are any. There's not a halacha on this. The halacha doesn't talk. And again, the halacha that we said there are generalities of the halacha, and the question is, how do you break it down to its finest point so that you can know how to balance yourself under those kinds of circumstances? So it's a fascinating Gemara, and Mitzvah Shem will pick it up next week from the bottom of Chav Vav Lamed Aleph and hopefully have an answer to the question.
Kaya, Kaya.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good today. Baruch Hashem. All right, thank you very much.
Have a good week.
Have a nice week, everyone.